Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to February. It's Lisa Norell here at the Mindful Marketer Livestream, episode 69, Marketing in the Values Economy, from Awareness to Action. We're very pleased that you joined us today, and we had a global, huge response to this topic. And so let us know as we're in this live stream together for the next 35 minutes where you're from and any questions that you have for us and for my special guest today. You know, the best thought leadership pieces and AI-generated content do not matter if you are not aware of what your audience values. And in today's conversation with value graphics pioneer David Allison, we're going to hear highlights from his just released book, which is The Death of Demographics. And guess what, folks? Once again, we are going to be doing a book giveaway today for our U.S. friends. Again, you got to tell us where you're from, put your name in the comments, and say hello. We have a number of repeat visitors and friends coming back to us today. So welcome, Alan. Hello, Alan in Atlanta. So what is it we're going to talk about today with The Death of Demographics? Well, we're going to help you, first of all, understand what we mean by value graphics and why demographics have limited efficacy in this new post-COVID world. And we're going to go one step further and help you actually take action from today's discussion. And you know from all of our other shows that we are pragmatic, and we always like to help you walk away not only with some provocative ideas, but also some action steps that apply to you as a market maker. So we're going to talk about this incredible study, this in-depth study and analysis of over 700 surveys. And this new program that David and his team put together, which is a 15-point archetype quiz. We're going to have a great case study to discuss with you. And we're going to talk about why all of you who have done your buyer personas and market analysis for 2023 may be missing a key piece of the puzzle. How's that for keeping the cliffhanger going? Well, in the meantime, I want to welcome a friend who is a repeat visitor to the Mindful Marketer livestream and podcast, David Allison, and to celebrate his new book, The Death of Demographics. David joins us from beautiful Canada. And David, welcome back.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me over.
Yes, and hopefully all of your delivery people have stopped knocking on your door today.
I had them all canceled, and just as soon as we started talking to each other, the doorbell's ringing. Everybody's like, nobody got the memo. Nobody got the memo. Anyway, I think they're all done now. It's great.
Oh my gosh.
It's great to be here. But you know what? I'm gonna right away jump in and just because in case everybody was listening and was listening to numbers, you said that we've done 700 surveys.
700,000.
You said 700. We've done 750,000 surveys around the world. So it's a much bigger sample set.
You know what? This is what happens when I get up early. I went to the pool and I did a lot of sprints. I clearly have some water in my ears that is affecting my memory. So my apologies.
No
my apologies, David.
I think it's just a symptom of what we're all living through right now. There's so much stuff coming at us and so many details we have to remember. So it's a good number, though. 750,000, that's a good number.
It's a very impressive number. And I do want to also mention before we dive in, we have Ginger joining us from New York City. We have one of our prior guests and mutual friends. We have Afra joining us today from Michigan. So hello, Afra. Afra loves HR. Boy, HR can benefit from some of your research. I want to start because yesterday was National Read Along Day. I'm going to read an excerpt from your book that is my mic drop moment.
Okay.
I want everyone sit around the circle and pay attention. All right. Demographics are a flawed model. the data prove it. Psychographics face the same limitation. They are historic records that do not help us understand how to influence what people do next. And when it comes to marketing, all that matters is how to influence what people do next. Tell us more, David, about why we're in a new economy and we need to stop focusing exclusively on historic data.
Yeah, it's a great way to start thinking about this. As marketers, we've inherited a set of tools to help us understand our audiences. Because ultimately, that's our job, is to understand our audiences and get them to say yes, get them to do something we'd like them to do. And the tools we have to do this kind of fall into two categories. There's demographic information, age, gender, income, marital status, number of kids, all that sort of stuff. And then there's everything else which can fall under the umbrella of psychographic information. And that's everything from feelings and emotions to brand preference indexes to all the click studies and geo-targeting, all that other stuff that we collect about our consumers. And all of it's great. And you can use it to see patterns in how people have behaved. But the problem with psychographic information is, as you said, it's a look in the rearview mirror. It's like what's already, if we know it and can write it down, it's already done. And demographics, they just describe, I like to say they put a fence around a group of people that you're interested in understanding. But assuming that all the people inside that demographic fence are the same as each other, it's kind of a flawed construct when you think about it. Let's say we're talking about 18 to 24-year-old men who make $75,000 a year. Sure, that's a great fence. But assuming that everybody in that fence is the same as each other, just because they're 18 to 24-year-old men who make $75,000 a year, it's kind of ridiculous when you back it out. So we've got a description of what people are and psychographics as a record of how they've behaved so far. But as you've said, our job is to get them to do something next. We need to be predictive and forward-looking. And that takes us into the whole conversation about how do people make decisions? And that all winds back to values. So yeah, human behavior, behavioral psychology, it's all about what people value. That's how we decide what we're going to do.
Yes. And you also, I applaud you. You've taken a bold move by dedicating quite a portion of your book saying that ageism is embedded in old psychographic and demographic research. And yet many people earn their fortunes running workshops and trying to convince people that, adults over 50 will fill up this housing community. And so let's go focus all of our marketing efforts on the 50 plus audience. I mean, we're still doing it. How frustrating is that to you?
It's incredibly frustrating. And it made sense at one point in history. There was a time thousands of years ago when we all had to act our age. And we don't have to act our age anymore. We all get to do kind of whatever we want to do. And in fact, the data we've collected from around the world, the 750,000 surveys in 152 languages across 180 countries, more accurate than you need for a PhD. It proves that the people within any demographic cohort, including age, so age, gender, income, any of those, the people inside there, how targetable are they? They're only about 10% similar to each other in terms of how they view the world and how they make decisions. And we're here trying to get them to make a decision. So you got a 10% chance using demographics that you're going to get it right. So if we go to that housing community, it might be that 50-year-olds are the ones who are going to come in there. That's cool. But then you're leaping to stereotypes and saying, okay, 50-year-olds are our target market. That's our demographic. And all 50-year-olds like this. And all 50-year-olds are going to think like this. And they're all going to do that. And they're all going to want this. That's nonsense. That's where it starts to fall apart. 50-year-olds are as different from each other as snowflakes are. And so putting them all in a pile and saying, let's talk to the 50-year-olds in a certain way because they're all the same as each other, that's where the data just doesn't back it up. So yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. And I mean, you're diving right to the heart of the matter with this question, because the longer we keep doing it, the longer we're just perpetuating ageist ideas about who people are, and gender sexist ideas and racist ideas and homophobic ideas. And all of these things are perpetuated by our insistence that the right way to look at people is with demographic labels.
Yes, you're working on it to some degree. You are an evangelist for value graphics. I met you about 3 years ago when you started this evangelical movement around value graphics. Where are you now? And what industries or types of organizations are you seeing the greatest traction around this concept of value graphics?
Well, that's an interesting question. How do we see response to this so far? Larger organizations tend to be more complex. And the complexity inside an organization is something that's screaming out for a North Star. How can we get everybody inside this company to agree that we're going to head in that direction? This is the best use case for value graphics entirely, because we all know that consumers are important, prospects are important, our employees are important, our shareholders are important, all these various stakeholder groups that we need to be paying attention to. But how can a CEO or a CMO or anybody who's involved in the direction of an organization do things that will benefit all those varied stakeholders? Well, the only way to do that is to have a common set of core values that are shared by all of those different groups of people and say, that's the direction we're headed. And it's all based on data, on values data, instead of, I'm sure you've heard me tell this joke before, but the way we tend to focus on values today is with an incredibly accurate, I can't even say it with a straight face, an incredibly accurate methodology I like to call 6 vice presidents and a box of donuts. Because that's the way we tend to pick our values, isn't it? We put some people in a room and we've sent a little quiz around to the staff and said, well, the CEO is really all about diversity. So that's one of our values. And everybody loves collaboration. So that's a value. And we put those words up behind the receptionist and we go, yay, values, tick, we're done. And we can't do that. It needs to be about, as any other business metric, let's use empirical data to figure out what are the values that are driving the decisions of people that we're trying to influence to get to say yes.
Yes, that sounds like a great plan. I want to remind everybody you're listening today to my conversation with 2-time show guest David Allison and his new book, The Death of Demographics. And I'm pleased to be here. Make sure you stick with us because we're announcing the book giveaways at the end of the show. By the way, David, we have a very interesting question from Ginger in New York. Ginger asks, how do you as a marketer deal with people who search for products and services with demographics as their marker in their search bar, such as vitamins for people over 50 or singles cruises? What do you do? Please do not put me on the singles cruise. Ginger, don't do it. Don't do it.
Ginger's thinking about vitamins and singles cruises. So we know what kind of Friday Ginger's having. So the answer, though, is very much what you've suggested here, Ginger. Thanks for the question. Demographics and values are not mutually exclusive. We need to understand that there are going to be cruises for singles. So that's going to be a certain demographic. But all singles are not interested in that cruise. The ones that are going to be interested because of a set of values that drove them to that decision. You know what? Let's just back up for 2 seconds and talk about the connection between values and how humans make decisions. Because this is hardcore science. This is the whole theory behind what we do. You can talk to any kind of behavioral scientist. You can talk to a neurologist, a psychologist, psychiatrist, sociologist, and they all agree on one core principle, is that values drive every single human decision. Every behavior, every emotion that every human has comes from a part of your brain that is responsible for choosing door A or door B, can of soup A or can of soup B, cruise for singles A or cruise for singles B. And the only way our human brains know how to make a decision is to very quickly, in the split second, you don't even know it's happening half the time, decide this one matches my values more than this one does. You don't have a choice. This is not like, oh, I'm going to use my values to make a decision today. It's the only way human brains work. It's what being human is. Values drive our decisions. And if we're all in the business of helping people make decisions, then we better understand what their values are, because that's the fuel for every human decision. That's why we're so wrapped up in this piece around values. And as Ginger suggests here, layering them on top of demographic and psychographic information, because that stuff still matters. It's just we've been using it for the wrong thing. We've been saying that since we are talking to baby boomers, well, they must all be terrible with technology because they're baby boomers. And that, men, well, they're hopeless when it comes to cooking or doing any housework or anything like that because they're men. I mean, that's the nonsense that ends up happening if we rely on demographics to help us understand people instead of just labeling people, which is something they're really good for.
Yes, we need a little less of that labeling after what we've experienced, at least in the United States, where there is so much polarization. And finding those people with common values for me, it was a lifeline during COVID and even after COVID. I've had Chip Conley on our show, and we did our live stream, my first global live stream out of Mexico back in October. He found and touched on a nerve with society, which was finding people who are lifelong learners, who have a spiritual practice, and who are passionate about belonging to groups, and formed the Modern Elder Academy. And no one else has done it as well as he has, because he found those values.
Absolutely. Let me talk about one there, because you've rung a bell. In our research, we've identified 56 core human values. They're the only values that drive what people do. So it's not really that many when you think about it. It's, there's 88 keys on a piano. So 56 values that drive everything that every human does. It's not that many, really. But one of them that's almost universally important, and it's the most important value in the United States of America, is belonging. Now, belonging, here's where it gets interesting. In this massive data set that we've built, there's 912 different kinds of belonging. There's 912 different ways that people want to get that value met in their lives. Everything from belonging to a sports team, to belonging to a family, to belonging to a group that has some sort of common goal. There's 912 variations. So what we're able to do now, instead of just sitting around and saying, well, gee, we're trying to chase consumers and we're going to, we know belonging is important. We can go, okay, but what kind of belonging? And when we talk about ambition, what kind of ambition? What kind of environmentalism? What kind of social standing? So we can get down to that level of understanding the real drivers of how people make decisions about everything in their life. And then as marketers, you just connect the dots. Just say, wow, if that's what's going to make people say yes, and this is the stuff my product or service or brand is about, then I just need to tell the story, build the product, position the brand in a way that rings those bells and pushes those buttons. And now you're using values-driven demand generation as a way to accomplish your goals, which I'm assuming is growth and increasing your ROI and getting all the metrics to move in the right direction.
Yes. Now, here in the United States, and by the way, Ginger, thanks for that great question. And we hope that was helpful, and welcome your additional follow-up comments. I want to speak for a minute about the shift going on in North America from growth at any costs to efficiency and effective use of your demand gen and branding strategies. We're seeing it. We saw it yesterday in the investor call from Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, that efficiency and effectiveness are now de rigueur, not growth at any cost. So how can people learn what their ideal audiences value and start to apply it to their go-to-market strategy and messaging without adding 6 months delay or a year delay in the launch of their products and services?
Okay, couple of things in there. First off, Using traditional methods to try and formulate messages, campaigns, strategies, whatever you're talking about, and talking to groups of people based on demographic and psychographic information. As we've talked about, the data is clear. It's only about 10% effective at best, which is why when we get a 3 or 4% response rate on a direct email campaign, everyone pops the champagne cork because when you think about it, 3 or 4% is a 97 to 96% fail. And yet we get excited about those 3 and 4% numbers. So if we're talking about being effective, what we need to do is put people into groups based on how they will say yes, what will drive the response we want. Put them in groups like that, and then pitch your campaign, your message, your strategy, your brand, your position into those fields of listening instead of ideas about boomers are bad with technology, millennials like avocado toast, and Generation Z doesn't know what they're doing. You have to get past those kinds of stereotypical ideas about what you're going to say and do, and think about the buttons you need to push for this group. Who cares how old they are? If they're in a group of people who will respond to this, that's the group you want to be paying attention to. If they're in another group over here that will respond to these things, then that's the way you need to go forward. If you do that, you go from about a 10% effectiveness and efficiency on any cohort that you're targeting to as much as 8 times that. It goes up to like an 80 or 90% similarity within a group of people in terms of all the things that they will say that they value and they want and they need and they expect out of their life. So in its simplest form, think of it this way. If you spend $1 targeting a group of people using demographics and psychographics, you got about a 10% chance it's going to work. If you spend $1 targeting a group of people based on their values, you got about an 80% chance it's going to work. So which buck do you want to spend? I want to spend the 80 cent dollar, not the 10 cent dollar. It's like taking your marketing budget and giving it an 8x without spending an extra dollar, just by understanding what will make people say yes. That's it. That's all you got to do. Just change the way you look at them. Don't have to do anything different than that.
Yes, good to know. Quickly, people are probably starting to think, well, how? What do I do? What do I do? Before I welcome an audience question from Alan, I want to find out, you've got a quiz in your new book, The Death of Demographics. Would that be a good place to start to really uncover that quickly? Or would there be another step someone would take to preclude or to precede some of those old, less effective approaches or replace them?
There's 3 different ways you can do this. The first way is you can hire us. We work for companies. The second way, you go and buy the book. In the book, there's a 10-question quiz. Sorry, 15 questions. That was the last book, was a 10-question. A 15-question quiz you can send out to through your CRM, through SurveyMonkey or whatever it is you're using to send out questions. And you get as many people as you can to respond to that. And it'll point you to a chapter in the book. And in that chapter, we tell you everything we know about one of the 15 archetypes that are present in this global data set. That's taking the entire population of the world and saying there's 15 kinds of people. So it's, not the most accurate tool in the world, but it's still values-driven information about one of 15 archetypes that your target audience, your consumers, are going to be most similar to. And in that chapter, there's all kinds of useful information about their values, their wants, their needs, their expectations, how you can use that information, how they compare to other people in different parts of the world. Everything we could think of to spill around that archetype is in the book. But there's one more way too, and I'll give this to you right now. There's 3 questions that we've refined and honed over time that you can just start adding without buying a book. This is free. Just take these 3 questions and ask people the next time you send out a survey, ask these 3 questions. You can reword them a bit so it sounds more like your voice. If you've got a frontline sales team, if you can train them to try to weave these questions into casual conversation, or maybe you've got a call center working for you and you maybe find a way to get them to just kind of pop one of these into conversation. The point is, over the course of as long as you can, collect the answers to these 3 questions. People will answer them in different ways, but you're listening for themes. Excuse me. You're listening for themes bubbling to the surface. And those themes are people's values. They're telling you what they care about, right? So here's the 3 questions. Lisa, you're on mute. I can't hear you. You jumped in there with something.
I said, tell me. I'm on the edge of my seat.
Okay. So the 3 questions. The first one, why do you go to work? And you're going to get questions like, well, I got it because I pay my bills. No, we want to know, why do you do this thing that you spend at least 1/3 of your waking life doing? Why are you doing this? And people will start to tell you why they're making that decision. That's their values coming up. Second question, you just won the lottery. Why would you give away half of it? Not where would you give it to? My Aunt Sally, breast cancer. Like, no, it's like, why would you give away half of your lottery winnings? Again, values will start to bubble to the surface. Everyone will have a different answer to that. And my third question, which is also a great question to use at a dinner party with your friends after about the second glass of wine, because you really start to learn a lot about your friends when you ask this question. You get to write a letter to yourself from 10 years ago. What would you say to your 10 years ago self, and why? I don't really care what you would say to your 10 years ago self. I'm going for the why. So this is Simon Sinek's why, but turning it into an actual useful metric of sorts that you're going to be able to say, okay, asking those questions over time, we keep hearing that it's about family. We keep hearing that it's about friends. We keep hearing that it's about personal growth. We keep hearing that it's about the environment. So you're starting to see themes come up, and in a really rough back of a napkin sketch kind of way, that starts to give you some sense of what people's values are.
Love it. Those are 3 great questions. And for those of you that have missed those, we're going to make sure you get them if you are subscribed at themindfulmarketer.com. We make sure we put those not only in our newsletters, but we also will have them in the podcast show notes. So make sure you have signed up for future shows and for a recap of today's show at themindfulmarketer.com. David, this is really fun, I have to say. I want to hear this question now from Alan in Atlanta. Alan wants to know, David, this is sounding pretty similar to insurance actuarial classes, which are highly data-driven. Is this a fair analogy?
I wish I could give you a smart answer because I don't know anything about insurance actuarial classes, but I'm going to say maybe, and I'll have to get back to you. That's the answer you're supposed to use when you don't know how to answer a question, isn't it? Help me out with this, Lisa. Help me understand what insurance actuarial classes are. Maybe I can answer.
I will say, being a mindful marketer, when I don't know something, I say, I don't know.
Yeah,
so I would say, Alan, neither of us are insurance actuarial experts. Please email Lisa at lisanorell.com, and we'll continue the question. And tell us why that matters to you, Alan. Maybe you can also give us some context. We have another question from Flavia, and I apologize if I mispronounce Flavia's name. She wants to know, how do we determine when the values of a group start to change? And is that even possible? Whoa.
That's a great question. So here's the thing. You get your values in a very early stage in your life. Somewhere in your late childhood, early adolescence, there's a period that humans go through called socialization. And during that period, whoever's most important in your life, you kind of imprint their values. It could be a parent, it could be a friend's parent, maybe it's a teacher. Who knows? It could be, for all of us, it's different. And the time frame is a little different for everybody. So your values are set up for you very, very early in life. And except in extremely rare unicorn-like cases, they never change. Your values are with you for the rest of your life. Now, how you respond to the world based on those values, that changes. Like, we all went into COVID, a thing we'd never had to deal with before. We all had crazy behaviors as a result of that. Some of us were Zooming with our mom and dad 25 times a day because we wanted to make sure our family was okay. Family was a value. But if you went into COVID and you didn't have family as one of your core values, you were not suddenly calling your mom and dad 25 times a day to make sure they were okay. You may have had, I keep saying ambition as a value. And during COVID, you were calling your boss 25 times a day to make sure that they understood you're still working just as hard and you wanted that promotion that they talked about before you all had to start working from home. So once you know the values of a group of people, consumers for product X or prospects for product Y, once you know what those values are, they're not changing. Now, the only way they will change is if the people change. So think about this. If you're going to use values to understand the employees, the workforce inside an organization, that's great. There's tools we can use to do that. There's the quiz in the book will help you with that. Even those 3 questions will help you determine what the values are of a group of people who work inside an organization. But the next day you hire someone new and someone leaves, and so on and so on and so on. So gradually, as new people are attracted, it's going to change the makeup of that workforce. It's not going to be as dramatic as you think, because the reason people are coming to work there is their values have drawn them there. And that's the reason these people are there too. Their values have drawn them there. It's the only way humans know how to make a decision is with their values. So we're bringing in fairly similar folks, but the best way to do that is to get an idea of the folks who are not working for you yet. So go into the talent pool, find out what the values are within the talent pool for your industry and the ones you got right now. And then you can see how to future-proof the culture that you build and the engaged workforce that you try, or the engaged workplace that you try and put together. Because you know who's here now and who's coming tomorrow. Now you're set up for a little bit of a longer time.
Very good. Flavia, thank you for that question. And tell us where you're from in the chat. I'd love to know. I want to remind everyone, book giveaway is not too far from us now. And one of the other areas of your book I love, David, is your in-depth analysis and outline of the 15 archetypes. And I had a conundrum when I was going through those. I was thinking to myself, what if? Well, I'm going to be buying a new car here in the next 12 to 18 months. Let's just say I want an electric car, which I do. And the head of marketing at Mercedes-Benz EV division wants to market to me. What happens when a person like me sees my values across 3 different archetypes? Because I picked 3, being environmentalist, connector, and spiritualist. VP of marketing, what does he or she do with when it's like, well, Lisa actually fills the description of 3 different ones?
Yeah. Well, if the VP of marketing of Mercedes used that quiz and found out over the large group of people that the majority of them fit in this group and maybe a secondary group over here, then you'd need to be making some decisions about how much you want to fall in this direction versus that direction. The quiz in the book was never designed for one person. It's a sociological quiz. It's meant to be taken by 1,000 people, 500 people, 100 people. And then of those results, it'll point you to the group that is most similar to the folks who responded. So it's a bit of a flaw when one person takes it and goes, well, but I fit into a couple. Well, of course you do. But if we asked 1,000 people like you, we'd be able to say, well, 900 of them all fit into this group. And so that's the group that the CMO should be focusing on.
Understood. Very helpful. Well, once again, time is flying. And I love this conversation so much. Talk to me about the first thing a head of marketing needs to do now that he or she has heard this conversation and said, we've been doing it all wrong. We're wasting money. We're wasting time. Give us their 30-day plan to shift towards a value graphics approach to finding their perfect customers.
Well, at a very base level, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you understand the values of the people that you're trying to reach. So you can use any of the methods that we talked about today, and even just the simplest one, with the next customer survey you send out, ask those 3 questions. Even that is a better place to start from than where we are now, which is 6 vice presidents and a box of donuts trying to figure out what the values are on behalf of some other group of people that there may or may not be similar to at all. So start there. And then you need to decide, there's all kinds of complex decisions you need to make from there. If you already have segments inside your organization that you're bound to. There's no changing the way we think about our 2 or 3 segments, and those will likely be demographically based. And as many flaws as that might have, it might be what you have to work with. So your job then is to try and figure out which demographic segment is going to have which set of values that will be driving it towards the decisions that it makes, that all those people make in their lives. So finding the values, applying them to however you want to segment. Of course, I think the best way to segment an audience is based on values. Layer the demographics and the psychographics on top of a value graphic segment, because isn't that the most useful? What we're trying to do is get, a group of people to make a decision. So let's segment based on how they're going to make a decision. So find the values, figure out how it applies to your segmentation model, either applying it or throwing them out the door and starting from scratch with a value graphic segmentation model.
Great. Well, folks, it's not too late. It's still February 3rd, a good time to revisit what will move the needle on your sales revenues in 2023. You just heard it from David, the value graphics master. David, thank you so much for being with us today to talk about the death of demographics. What a fun time. And can't wait till you're back again to visit.
I'm anytime. Love to come.
Take good care. I have a short summary here of our mindful moments. And for those of you who are listening, I trust these will be helpful for you to recap. The first thing I want to walk away with today is that a reminder that our values drive all of our behaviors. And I thought that was very powerful. And that during those socialization years as a child, those years are when you form and acquire your values, and they're pretty constant. And then finally, start to let your board of directors and your investors know that if we've been focusing exclusively on demographics research, that we are seeing a 10% efficacy rate and we can do better. Find ways to reach out to David, to at least do the quiz in his latest book, The Death of Demographics, and consult with him on what your company can do to maybe move that from 10% to 50%. 80% is ambitious, but even 50% efficacy is a lot better. So with that, I want to wrap up and tell everyone, we have these kinds of conversations once a month on LinkedIn Live. We broadcast on Facebook as well as YouTube. And we also broadcast on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Listen wherever you get your favorite shows. And if you're feeling kind and mindful, be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it very much. And if you're not a member of the Marketing Growth Leaders community of senior growth leaders and marketing leaders, check it out at marketinggrowthleaders.com. This is where we come together, share ideas, innovate, and provide each other with growth strategies that work. So with that, let me wrap up and remind you our next show is Friday, March 10th. Guess who I'm going to be inviting? A former CMO of Mozilla, who is now president of Lytics, Mr. Yasha Kakis-Wolf, is going to be joining us, and he is the president of Lytics, and we're going to be talking about customers, cookies, and content, a president's perspective. So make sure you go to themindfulmarketer.com, sign up for the know-ahead list, and we will see you March 10th.